Britain is a nation of millions of cat and dog lovers, so just imagine how mortified they'd be to discover that they had been unwittingly buying goods made out of cat and dog fur. But until recently, such fur was turning up in coats, linings for boots and gloves, and even stuffed toys. And because exporters often attached false labels, you'd never know you'd been duped. Scottish MEP Struan Stevenson was shocked to learn about the cat and dog fur trade and began supporting the Humane Society International campaign to have it banned.
Well, Humane Society told me that their research indicated up to 2 million cats and dogs were being cruelly slaughtered, and still are, by the way, cruelly slaughtered every year in China, simply to supply the rag trade and the tourist industry in Europe. And many of these animals were being skinned alive. The film footage that I've seen and the evidence that I've seen firsthand in many visits to China shows the cruel, the brutal nature of this business.
So what happened was that in Britain, when politicians and campaigners saw the undercover investigation footage that had been taken in China, everyone was immediately mobilised to try to track these products coming in. And in fact, the UK government, following pressure from the HSI, helped to develop a test to identify the origin of the furs.
Well, of course, we've purchased and had DNA tested many things, like individual cat skins, which we purchased in the Ramblas in Barcelona, or these cute little cats in baskets which come from China. When these are DNA tested, bizarrely, we've discovered that cats can often be made from dog skins. So they kill a dog to make a little cute cat. And it's cat and dog lovers who buy these things for their kids. You know, when I go around showing these to schools, a lot of the people say, oh my God, we have these in our rooms at home. We're going to never do this again, never buy them again. And of course you have full-scale rugs made out of dozens of cat skins, even a fur coat bought in Berlin, full-length fur coat made from 42 Alsatian puppy skins.
The next step on from producing the evidence of the suffering of animals in China was to launch the public petition. And of course, in doing that, celebrities are extremely useful. So the work of Heather Mills-McCartney in this area was invaluable.
So when Humane Society told me that Heather was on board, I said, this is great, because she has a website that gets tens of thousands of hits every month, and we need to gather up petition signatures because the Commission are asking for this. So we brought Heather, and she was willing to cooperate. We brought her over to a press conference. She announced that she was going to help us in this campaign.
The video that I received was from a guy in America from the Humane Society. And when I watched it, I just couldn't believe how horrific it was to see these dogs and cats being skinned alive. And I suggested that we should show this at the Parliament. And we did. And most of the MEPs and most of the journalists had to turn away. They couldn't bear to look at it. And I kept saying, you have to look at this, and this has to be changed. We knew in advance that we had to get a lot of signatories for anything to be taken notice of. The Commissioner, Mr. Cipriano, said, you know, you have to show that the public have a huge interest in this for it to become some kind of priority. We knew that people would be moved when they saw the visuals of these atrocious acts on dogs and cats. But I was very surprised that 250,000 people signed that quickly. And the support that we had was unbelievable.
Following submission of the petition signatures to the Commission, they really just couldn't stand back and ignore the weight of public opinion calling for a ban.
Then the Commission drew up a draft regulation which had to go through the normal parliamentary process. When it came eventually, after all the amendments were dealt with, when it came eventually to be voted in the plenary session, it was on a show of hands, but I looked round the room and it was a packed chamber, over 700 MEPs present. I didn't see a single vote against or even an abstention.
It would not have happened if Struan hadn't been involved. To see him just so passionate about it was inspiring.
British Conservative colleagues made this one of their keynote campaigns. Right from the start, they were hugely helpful to me and participated from beginning to end. Without the intervention of my colleagues, I think we'd still have been knocking on the door for potential legislation. It may still not have happened.
Where would we be without our mobile phones? They are the bedrock of communication on the move. But while domestic tariffs have plummeted in recent years, international call costs have remained high. Holiday makers and business people wishing to roam the world's airwaves have had to pay a high price to stay in touch. Giles Chichester is the Conservative MEP for the southwest of England and Gibraltar, and was a prime mover into the investigation of high mobile phone charging.
In my capacity as chairman of the Industry Committee, I organised a number of hearings in the Parliament to examine this specific issue, and we invited representatives from the Commission, from the regulatory authorities, from consumer bodies, and of course the mobile operators.
Levi Nietveld is an economic officer at BEUC, the European Consumers Organisation.
We provided MEPs with outrageous examples of very, very high costs, and we transmitted what consumers felt towards MEPs.
Mobile roaming, by definition, is a cross-border activity. So a regulator in country A can't intervene in country B where the charges are being levied. So there was a need for a pan-European measure to act on this failure of market competition. Commissioner Reding issued a warning to the mobile operators that something had to change in keeping with the prompts from us in the Parliament. And the industry, in effect, was told either you change or we're going to regulate to change you.
But most of the times it was just business as usual. There was a statement coming out from the operator saying, well, this is something we would look and we will try to do better, but in practice, very few things happened.
In 2006, following a recommendation from national regulators, the Commissioner for Information, Society and Media announced plans to cap the price of roaming calls.
The phone industry fought tremendously hard. I mean, this is a segment of the market that is very, very lucrative for them. It is, in terms of costs, very low, and they get a high fee for consumers.
The Parliament and the Council engaged in close negotiations on exactly what the level should be. Council was more sympathetic to the industry, I think it's fair to say. We were more sympathetic to the consumer. We pushed the levels down lower than the Council otherwise wanted.
As to the regulation, the content of the regulation, there were different parts. The first part was to inform consumers. So they would, when they travel abroad now, they receive a text message informing them about the costs. That's one part. The other thing was to cap the maximum charges, so to impose a price limit.
Normally speaking, we're all against regulation, unnecessary regulation. People think Europe is about bad regulations. In this case, the mobile roaming regulation, I believe, is one of the best things that we've done for consumers in Europe.
The financial services industry affects almost everyone in Britain, and what happens to the money you have or the money you need to borrow is now highly dependent on agreement at European Union level. Jonathan Evans is an MEP for Wales and the Conservative spokesman on economic and monetary matters in the European Parliament.
More than 1 million people in the UK are working in the financial services industry, in the banks, insurance companies, in fund management and the rest of it. We are a leading global presence, in many instances the leading presence in the world. Therefore, of course, this industry is of crucial importance to everybody in Britain, and the rules and regulations governing this industry are made here.
Another way of looking at it is that when you combine what happens in the City of London and in the financial services sector with what the lawyers do and the accountants and other business services, it represents nearly a quarter of our economic output. 70 to 80% of the legislation that affects the City of London and the UK financial services industry comes from the European Union, decided in Brussels by the Commission member states and the European Parliament.
In 1999, the European Commission came up with the Financial Services Action Plan, which was designed to simplify access to financial services across Europe.
If we can get a proper operating single market, then of course UK companies are best placed to grow their businesses.
One key area of improvement within the Financial Services Action Plan is MiFID.
Well, MiFID basically is the Markets in Financial Instruments Directive, and what that in essence means is that we have been looking at the rules that govern the way in which investments work to try to make those rules more applicable to a situation in which anyone in the 27 countries of the EU will be able to operate on a cross-border basis. Until now, we've had too many, as it were, national markets. And it's very understandable that if you're running a market, for instance, in Italy and in Spain, you perhaps want to keep that a national market. As far as London's concerned, we want it to be an international market, a European market in a global world, because, of course, if we're able to achieve that sort of change, it's going to help our companies to grow still further.
MiFID's important because in a Europe of 27 member states, you can't be very efficient if you've got 27 different sets of rules. So if you're thinking about share trading, having one set of rules about how you trade shares across the region is very helpful for companies and for individuals. The British MEPs made a huge impact on MiFID, in fact. There was a point in the process where ministers in the Council of Ministers had reached an agreement on MiFID that really wasn't an agreement with which the UK was very happy. And MEPs made sure that they put forward amendments, they debated the issues with their colleagues within their own group and within other political groupings in the Parliament, and they created some more leeway for elements of the directive that broadly satisfied people in the City of London, both in the stock exchanges, in the brokers and in the banks.
Another example of streamlining financial services within Europe is the recently approved Payment Services Directive.
The Payment Services Directive is all about ensuring that companies are in a position to do cross-border money transfers. And what most people know, if they've had one such transfer in their life, is that the banks sting them every time. A huge amount of money is charged as a supplement for transferring money from one jurisdiction to another. We're in one jurisdiction in terms of financial services here within Europe, and therefore the Payment Services Directive is all about ensuring that we do away with those swingeing penalties, and again a directive that British Conservatives have very largely been promoting here.
MiFID and the Payment Services Directive are just two of the new legal instruments that will